This week, we got class both today and Wednesday. Thursday and Friday, remember, our student holidays. The faculty is still working. We got to go sit in meetings and classes all day, Thursday and Friday in Calhoun. So y'all enjoy your 2 days. Next week, I will not be here. So I'll be at Cisco conference on Monday in North Carolina. And then Tuesday through Thursday, I'll be at a computer instructors conference up there in North Carolina also. They're 40 miles apart or something. And apparently the river is just rose. So no class next Monday or Wednesday for me. So everybody got that? It doesn't affect other classes. That's just me going to that. So I'll get updates on Cisco on Monday. Actually get something on VMware as part of the updates. And then Tuesday through Thursday, they've got seminars by different people on different subjects, and I'm not sure what all. I know VMware's doing a presentation there, because I know the lady that's in charge of their academy program, or is the representative for it, and that she's speaking there, that she told me she would be there. And I know, I'm pretty sure Jean Andrews or her daughter, one of her daughters, or maybe 2 or 3 of them there, I'll be there to talk about A+, and the training for that for CompTIA, coming from CompTIA, along with CompTIA being there, and probably talk about some other things. And I'm not sure who else, and then I will be doing 2 presentations on DreamSpark Imagine. So I'm speaking at the conference also. So 2 of the sessions I know where I will be. I'll be up in front of them teaching. And no, they don't pay me to do that. They don't give me a discount on attendance either or anything. I still had to pay $60 registration fee, I think it was, for the 3 days. Which isn't bad, because I think they'll give me supper one night and they feed me lunch all 3 days. And give me snacks in the morning and afternoon that I can get a Coke and a candy bar or something. And for $60, that's not too bad out of that one. So hopefully I gain some additional information, learn some additional things on how to do some other things. Last year the conference was real good. I'm duplicating their conference next spring in Georgia. And that's the other thing I'm going to be doing while I'm there, is talking to the people that are displaying and stuff there, telling them to reserve the date and plan on being in Georgia the 2nd week of March next year, so that I can pull that one off. And last year they had a couple of security things too, so hopefully I can get some stuff on it, but maybe learn something else that even fits in this class. Like I say, that they had before, that CompTIA's had an update on the A+ and stuff, which I assume they will again, which was actually presented by the CompTIA people. All right, so this week, I don't remember exactly where we are. Seems like we're a week ahead of the game. We're just going to stay right on schedule. With whatever I've got down here for the schedule. So 5 is this week and next week, and we're already in 5. We're almost through 5. So we'll have covered 5 by the time we finish out today. The only thing we got left in here is about the SATA drives. And I don't remember if they tell us anything about PATA or not. PATA is the older one. It had the bigger connectors on it. The hard drives also were the slower speed drives on it, and the transfer rates were slower. You've still got plenty of people using PATA drives out there. However, your newer machines are using SATA. Serial versus parallel. Otherwise, the names are the same. And I can't remember what all the letters in there stand for. So you talk about a couple of versions of SATA here, and basically what's changed on it is SATA 2 they go is hot pluggable, and then SATA 3 that they just increased the transfer, and that they allowed for solid state devices and optical drives. Though a lot of your optical drives are still PATA, oddly enough, that I keep running into those. But SATA is going to give us SATA 2, which is where a lot of stuff is sitting at, is giving us the 3 gigabits per second. That's not right. 3 gigabits per second transfer speed, except they've got an error right here, but they said up to 3 gigabits per second, and then they translate it here. Actually, they've got it wrong on both of those lines, on SATA 1 and SATA 2. But it's 3 gigabits or 1.5 gigabits, and then they say that that is in megabits, 150 and 300. That's not correct. They're missing a 0 on both of them. They didn't get the gig on either one. So that should be 1500. That one should be 3000. Everybody got that? Just be aware of that. That's obviously a typo on their part. Hot pluggable, remember, means that the machine can be running and you can unplug and plug in another drive on it. So it's what it's giving you on SATA. PATA did not have that ability, but it's giving you the same thing as you do with USB. So you just move to that one on. Each drive has its own channel. With a single drive connected to each cable and port. And actually a cable on there, I guess they do all have separate cables, so you don't have multiple on SATA plugging in. I was trying to think there for a second. It does have a 15-pin connector that supplies 3, 5, and 12 volts, and that it says it can be up to 1 meter or 2 meters for eSATA, which isn't including power across on it, and so it notes on that one it has a different connector for it. And then it tells you all new motherboards include support for multiple SATA devices. Typically you've got 4 connections on them, usually for the SATA. There's 4 SATA ports on there for you. Is what I found, although I'm sure there's some that got more than that. But 4 SATA plugs is what I'm typically finding. Anybody finding differently? And the boot drive, it tells you, should be connected to the lowest SATA channel number. And that it's going to go through, looking on those when it's doing it. And that they tell you that information. And remember, we had that issue back there of that some of those had actually been set on a boot into a different SATA port on it, and we had to change it. But remember, I believe it wasn't it the blue plug was the 0 one? And that the other SATAs were black, I think, on there? That sounds right to you? Good. So all of that involved in there. Then installing them, y'all have already installed SATA devices because y'all uninstalled and installed them back there. And all you had to do was unplug them from both ends and plug them in. And as opposed to back on the PATA and even older versions of PATA, you had to get into twisting the cable and all kinds of other things sometimes to mark which one was the beginning one. And that you also had to get them in the right order. And the odd part was on the cables, the far end one, if the cable, if that was our cable and it's got a connector here, and a connector here, and a connector here, putting this one into the motherboard, which one of those two would you think would be number one? Participation time. X or Y? How many vote for X? How many vote for Y? How many of you didn't vote? All right, we now know there's 4 of y'all asleep in here. Y'all can all turn and jab the ones asleep. This is going to be 1, this one's going to be 2. The end of the cable is number 1, in between is the second one. Actually, in their numbering, it's 0 and 1, because it's on the binary numbering, or numbering those. Okay? That's back on PATA, that's not SATA. But you got plenty of machines with PATA still out there, and if you're going to be a repair person, guess the machines that you're going to work on. Not the brand new machines that have just come out. You're working on the machines that are 3 to 5 years old or older. Okay? So you need to know about the older stuff on it. So that's their extent on SATA. Then they go into optical media. And so they've got a number of things here on optical. Compact disc being the original optical media out there, and obviously you still got compact disc out there today. Although if you're doing recording on the computer for data purposes, you're probably going to put it on DVD, not CD, as far as data, but as far as you could be recording to CDs anyway still on your machine to play on playable ones for music, etc. on it. 74 to 80 minutes of audio. They give you the thickness there. It's diameter, 120 millimeters in diameter. It's 1.2 millimeters thick. I've never been asked or seen those two numbers before. So I wouldn't worry about trying to remember those two numbers, okay? When you're at some geek party and you're trying to impress other geeks, that might be useful information. And then they note about on it, it's compact disc. There's 2 versions of compact disc, and the same thing's going to go with DVD. DVDs are just going to be store more stuff on them, but they're going to work the same way on it for you. Okay. You've got read only, and you've got read write ones. Read only, you can only write to them one time if you bought those. So they're CDRs. You can only write to it once and it can't be rewritten to you. Now, having said that, you can write to an area that you haven't written to onto the CD-R, but you can't write to an area you've already written to, or if you close the thing completely, you can't write to it either, okay? Because it's closed it off. But if you haven't closed it, you can write to it again, but it writes to an additional area where you haven't written to before. CDRW will actually go out there. It's got a little different surface on it. It will actually go out there and you can reformat the CDRW and it will remelt it around on there and you can rewrite on there. 50 times is a number I've heard you can do that on. I don't normally ever use CDRWs. I just do write once to them, and then if I don't need the thing anymore, it goes in the trash. Instead of trying to use CDRW. Because CDRW is not going to work for you playing in CD players. Because again, it's the different surface type stuff to it. It's still the same approach it's using on it, but it's got a different surfacing on it. We can get the CDRW, which will give you the information down here. It's basically a lot of the same, except for that it changes on it, and that note there, it's a little less space on it because it's got some area that's reserved out for it just to remember about what to do with the CD. So you've got a little less space on the CDRW, but it is rewritable. I say it's the numbers I've heard on that, and I don't know if they give you a number down here or not. They just tell you many times 50 is the number I've heard typically on that of what you can get out of one, although I'm not sure if you can really get that much. So you can use that approach on those. And then there's the DVD, which is the digital versatile disc. I don't remember ever seeing anything asking about what DVD stood for. CD, yeah. You need to know it is compact disc. And those are, it says here, most drives are read and write. And the DVDs come in R and RW also, just like the CDs. And they're going to DVD-ROM. There's actually DVD-R. You won't see them sold out there, either one of them as ROM. You'll see it as R. That it's a read-only. It really shouldn't be ROM because it's not read-only memory. It is read-only. For some reason they got it as ROM right here on it. And then the RW is the rewritable one. Remember, it does in both cases. It's just writing on the bottom of your CD or DVD. The top of it's not writing on, and that's why you can put stickers on there. You can write on there with your pen on top, with writable, with your nice magic marker type ones and stuff will write on there, which is what I'm typically labeling them with, is with, can you think of the name of it? What's the permanent markers? Sharpies. The Sharpies. I'm always using Sharpies on, because it'll stay put on there. And so I use a Sharpie to write on my CDs and DVDs. And so they give you that. And then they can be dual layer on them or not. And if they're dual layer, they'll support up to 8.5 gigabytes of data versus single side is 4.7. Most of them are the single side is what we've got out there, but the dual side it's writing on both sides. And I really don't see much of that out there. Most of it's sitting with the single side with the 4.7. Unless y'all have seen some of the other, but when I'm seeing tons of them for sale in the stores and everything, you go into computer stores and they'll have a whole row with rack after rack of, do you want to buy them one at a time, 50 at a time, 100 at a time in a package or whatever, and they're the 4.7s. And that's what I've got sitting out in my car. And that you can put movies on there, etc. Because 4.7 is a good bit of space. And movies are going to be recorded on DVD. And so I'm using DVDs every week, where one church gives me their church service on DVD each Sunday, and then I transfer it off there and put it out there on the internet. Blu-ray is another one that's got larger capacity on it that you can get also, and you obviously got movies using Blu-ray out there. The difference is the laser it's using, a blue laser versus a red laser. and that it notes there that they can contain up to 25 gigabytes on it, and a double layer one can do 50 gigabytes, and then that they say there's actually a 20 layer disk, and it actually is burning at different levels into there, and picks it up on hits on how deep the pit is to determine on it. Main thing I've ever seen on Blu-ray out there is for your movies, and that you've got movies using Blu-ray is where they've all moved to. But as far as data storage, that's stayed with DVD. Questions on that? Now, keep in mind with the optical drives, that is a laser it is reading and writing with. So when you go to disassemble those, you really don't want to disassemble them with power in them, because you do have a laser right there. And then the scratches, etc., will damage your disc. The other one is if you go to clean on a CD, DVD, you want to not go around in a continuous circle approach on it, but do circles going around on it to clean off it and to get smudges off of it, etc. And apparently the people at the church that I get the DVD from have oily fingers quite often when they handle them and stuff, and go to put them out for me and stuff, because I'm continuously go to read it, and it's usually split into 3 tracks on it, and one of the tracks won't read correctly for me, and I have to sit there and I just take usually actually I take the t-shirt or something, some piece of cloth, cotton cloth, and just wipe around on it. Surface looks good again and it works perfectly fine, but I'll see the marks and crud sitting there on it. So it says here to wipe the disc in straight lines from the center to the edge. The things I've read on it before says to just go in a circular motion going around, but sort of gives you that approach anyway. Bright sun, direct sunlight and heat will damage your CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays. Because remember, it's burning it in there, so if it gets heat into it, it can reburn it and wipe it out. RAID. Here's a good one for y'all. But RAID is going to allow us either to speed up how fast we get stuff written out there to disk, or to make sure that we have stuff backed up on there. Now, it's not going to be a backup means, but it's going to be a redundancy. Okay? With RAID, and there is 0 through 5 and 10 are going to actually 0, 3, 5, and 10, I believe it is, are ones that you're going to need to be really aware of. 0 is not really RAID. It does not give you redundancy, but it gives you speed. Okay? Wait a minute. Or did I just tell you wrong on that? Yeah. Because 0 is not going to actually give you RAID for redundancy. With RAID 0, so they cover 0, 1, 5, and 10. Mr. Spurlock can tell you what I think it was 2 or 3 RAID. I think it's 2 that he had on a test question last week. I've seen those others mentioned, but they're not. 3 is out there. 3 and 5 are real similar, but I really don't remember much on 2 and 4. Never having been told on. So I'll tell you in a second about 3 in the midst of this. 0 is striping. What RAID 0 does, and And remember, this is not redundancy, but RAID is redundant. It says redundant, that it's really, 0 is not really RAID, which is why it's 0 and not one of the bigger numbers, okay? Redundant array of independent disks. So it says you've got multiple disks in there. For anything except for one, well, 1 and 2. If we go any higher than 1, you're going to have at least 3 disks. Okay? 0 and 1, 0 can be done on 2 or more disks, and 1 is normally 2 disks. 0 says instead of us recording everything on one single disk, we've put multiple disks in our machine, and it works like one disk. But because it's multiple disks, guess what? It's going to be quicker to read and write from it, because stuff is going to be able to be read and written at the same time. Okay? As opposed to if it was all sitting on one disk. So it is striping. It's split it between disks. A file might be split across 3 disks, or it might be files on one disk and files on another disk. So if you're needing from this file while you're also needing from this file from a different program, they can both be reading from them both. So it's going to speed things up for you because you split things out on multiple units. So all striping or RAID 0 is going to do is a speed up for you. It has not duplicated any information. Does everybody follow that? That's 0. So it increases performance. No fault tolerance. If you lose one of the disks, you've lost them all. Okay? All of your data's gone. Does everybody follow on that? Which is the same as if you just had a single disk in there. Okay? If the disk went bad, you lost everything that was on that disk. Well, if you lose one, if you've got 3 disks that make up that stripe, that's done the striping with RAID 0, one of those disks fail, you don't know how to get to any information on the other disk. Now, yes, you can. If it didn't split it between the disks, you can go find some utilities and services to actually get in and pull stuff off there. But remember how it could be split up within the disk and stuff. You've got a major complicated package. So it's not an easy or cheap job to do. So yes, you could theoretically, but basically consider it, if one disk fails, the whole set's failed. Now, you don't have to replace them all. You just got to replace the one that's failed, but you got to rebuild everything all over again. Does everybody follow on that part? I'm not real sure how much some of y'all are listening to me. RAID 1. It does provide redundancy, and it is a mirroring system. With RAID 1, what it says is everything that you write out there, you're writing it in 2 locations. You're putting it on 2 different disks. If one disk fails, no problem, everything's written on the other disk. No performance gain on it, but there is no loss if a disk fails. Does everybody follow that part? So RAID 1 is pure redundancy. And that you've got, so if one of the disks fails, if it was not the disk that it's really using as what it considers the primary, it switches to the other one as now it's primary and works off that, and everything keeps on going. If you've got SATA 1 or higher, SATA 2 or higher drives in there, you can pull the drive that failed while shutting down your server, stick another drive in it, set it back to the RAID and put it back into the RAID on it, and it will rebuild the drive, and everything kept right on going, and you've never even hiccuped the whole thing. Other than you as administrator got a message that the drive died, and you opened it up, pulled it, and replaced it. Does everybody follow on that? And all of your customers, whoever they are, whether they're internal employees or outside customers or whatever, nobody else ever knew anything happened to your machine. So you've been perfect on that. So it gave you perfect redundancy. Now, you've doubled the amount of disk space you've got to have to meet your disk space. Okay, so it is cost on it. Second thing is, it is not backup. Redundancy and backup are two different things. And there have been some people who got caught on this. They had RAID 0 running on their system, and then some catastrophe happened, and they don't have their data anymore. The building burned down. That's the typical one. Or think back a couple of years ago, and since we're sitting right in the path of where it came, that we had the tornado come through. Tornado takes down the building with the server sitting in it. We had Mirror drive sitting in it. We lost all our data. Does everybody follow on that? So you still need to do backups and store at some exterior site, okay? Some external site. Whether you're doing this or not, this will take care of if it's a failure in operation, but it will not take care of an external threat to the machine, okay? That in turn is my concern about cloud storage out there. Most of cloud storage out there, all they're doing is providing you redundancy unless you're paying them extra to have them back it up. If their data center gets taken out, and so far that's not happened, but if I was a terrorist, the place I would be aiming for, and I'm not a terrorist, before he suddenly gets the idea, I'm going to get myself some reward money. I would look for aiming for one of the major Google data centers or Microsoft data centers to take one of those out. That was one of the reasons for taking out the World Trade Center, was it was a major communication center for New York City. They knew what they were aiming for, besides the fact lots of financial companies were located in there too, to knock down the economy of the United States. Hopefully we've got the communications part straight now, because y'all think back on that, if any of y'all were around for that or you've read things since on it, that was one of the problems the fire departments had, for instance, on when they realized the building was going to come down and they couldn't get the message to the others because it had already been damaged on where their relay towers were actually sitting in the building. And now they've got separate communication systems floating around for them to be getting messages on. And then you had all kinds of stuff fall apart at that point. RAID 5, which I tell you about now, is taking striping and adding parity onto it. Okay? So you're going to stripe your data across multiple disks, but you're putting parity on all of it. So you're adding a parity bit to it all. Okay? If a single disk fails in 5, because you've got the parity built into it, on RAID 0, disk fails, we lost everything. RAID 5, disk fails. You've got 3 disks sitting out there, and you can have any number of disks. What we got? And that's what the difference is in 3 and 5. RAID 5 is written data on all of the disks. But with the data on each one of them, it's written parity about that data that relates to the others. This disk fails. It is stopped at that point. You replace this disk with RAID 5, and it will use these 2 disks. Now, if you lose 2 disks, you're out of luck. If you only lose 1 disk, this works. It will use what's on these 2 disks, and the parity information that's built on there gives it what it needs on here. And it can rebuild all of the information off of what it knows on these 2 to get this one built back onto it. It will take a while. If you lose this one, depending on how big your disk is or whatever, you may be looking at that it's going to take you 24 hours to rebuild it. Okay? It's not going to be an instantaneous thing, because it's got to sit out there and do lots of calculations and rebuild it all back. But it will get back whatever was here. As opposed to on RAID 0, lose this, everything's gone. RAID 5, the parity is scattered across the disk. RAID 3, which they don't give you here, RAID 3 does this on an easy, lesser extent, that if you had 3 disks here, one of these disks will have all of the parity information and the other 2 disks has the data information. Lose a disk and it can rebuild perfectly fine off of that. But RAID 5 scatters the parity and the data information across all of the disks. Everybody follow on that? Now, so RAID 5, and actually RAID 3, give you increased speed and give you full fault tolerance for a single disk failure. Okay? So you're getting better speed because you're getting striping. So stuff's split between the disks. You've got the parity on there, so you've got the redundancy built into there, but the fault tolerance is there. Now, because of that parity information, depending on how many disks you got, divide your disk, divide the number of disks you got into 1, and that gives you the percentage that you lose to parity across on it. The more disks you got on, the less space you're losing for parity. RAID 10. What it is it's RAID 5 mirrored. So you've got 2 sets of RAID 5 disks out there. Does everybody follow on that? You will find places that are using RAID 10. It increases your throughput on it. And because of the way it failed, that if one disk fails, it can be recovered. It can actually be recovered quicker because it's got a mirror to get it from. If 2 disks in the same mirror pair fail, that's not right. All data will be lost because there's no redundancy in the striped sets. That's not correct right there. If a disk fails in each of the pair, if 2 disks fail in each pair, yes, you would lose. But if you just lose in one pair, you're not going to lose it because it's all still there on the other pair. But it's going to copy it. It's got 2 sets of the RAID 5, essentially what it's got out there. But you'll also see it, so then they mention about 1 plus 0, which is RAID 10, is because that is doing RAID 1 with the mirroring, and it's doing striping, and that's doing that approach on it. So you'll see that as 1 plus 0, or 0 plus 1, or 10. But that's really RAID 5. That's what it's doing there in 10, but it is mirroring RAID 5. But RAID 3, which they didn't mention, is just where the parity's all on one separate disk. But they all have to be the same size disk. Now, you could actually use multiple size disks in there, but they got to be formatted to the same size. That when you're doing RAID, they've all got to be the same size of individual disk, but they don't have to be physically the same size. They got to be logically the same size. Does everybody follow on that part? So You can replace it with a larger one, but it's got to be formatted down to the size of the others. And so you're not using that additional space, but maybe you go ahead and put a larger one in at that point, and then when the next one fails, and then when the third one ultimately, or you decide to go ahead and go up in size, you only have to replace 2 of them at that point instead of all 3. But you're just formatting to a smaller size on it. Questions on RAID? But again, major thing on RAID is it is redundancy, but it is not backup. If it's a failure of a drive, it'll take care of that. But if the machine has been damaged, causing you to lose the machine, you're out of luck. Okay? If you lose more than one drive, or for instance, you lose the whole machine because of fire or whatever. So you still got to do the backups. Says here that Windows 7 supports RAID 0 and RAID 1. That's probably correct. Usually you're not going to use RAID in client machines. RAID's going to be used on server machines. And Windows Server, whatever version of Windows Server you want to use, whether it be 2000, 2003, 2008, 2012, 2016, are going to support all versions of RAID. But clients going to do 0 and 1, but you're not going to normally see people actually doing RAID on client machines. Windows 7 or Windows 10 is not going to normally be used for RAID anyway. But you can. RAID can be installed both on the hardware level, that you can tell it at the disk level to do the RAID, that it can be installed from that level, or it can be done in Windows on the software level, and you can buy programs that will set it up for you. And that software version is going to be slower than the hardware version. The hardware version is going to be going back to the BIOS level of saying those are RAID drives on it. So you can set it from hardware, or you can do it on or running up on software. And then that it says you can use an operating system RAID feature also, which it says comes in between. That you can buy RAID software to put on your machine, but it's not going to do it as fast for you. And it says motherboards including onboard support for RAID. It says that software RAID, that should be usually is actually going to come back to hardware RAID, because notice it's a special controller card for your RAID processor, and that can be built into the motherboard. But if you're going to work on servers, you definitely need to be aware of RAID. And then they have you go through and create some RAID. And I think this is the last part. Let's see. Looks like it is. The file system is how is the data and stuff stored on the storage unit out there. We're going to talk about FAT32, and NTFS. And you're actually going to still use all 3 of them. NTFS is what you're going to typically use on your hard drives, because FAT and FAT32 aren't going to support your big enough hard drive for what you got for hard drives now. And stores it much more efficiently and handles larger drives. FAT and FAT32 are limited on the size of drives, but you are going to use, but NTFS is only going to be recognized typically by Windows on it, although Linux has now got drivers to recognize it also and work with it. But it is a Microsoft invention there, where FAT and FAT32, all of your different operating systems are definitely going to work with. The other one is Y'all's flash drives, your thumb drives are going to typically, can be done in NTFS, but then you're limited on the machines you can put them on. That they're going to typically be using FAT or FAT32 because they're not that big of drives, and that they're universally used on it. So we're typically still using the FAT32 back onto your flash drives. So if you're going NTFS is the latest thing, and that's what everything's using, that's not quite true. Partitions is where we split the hard drive, is where it's a division of it and splits it down into logical drives on it. And so you can have multiple partitions on your physical hard drive. On my physical hard drive on my machine at home, my main one, I've actually got it split in 3 partitions. And that's got a drive C, D, and E on it. That's left. It's not a need for today, but that was a need that I had. You remember I've said I've just upgraded over time since the 80s. Back there in the 80s, that I had a bigger hard drive than what was recognizable, and so I had to split it into multiple partitions down to the size that's recognizable. Well, I've increased the sizes of the partitions all along, but I've stayed with that organization so that wherever everything in there points to a drive letter, it can still find everything. Volume is just a single accessible storage area within it. The directory or folder is where all of our file names are stored and where the locations of them points to them all. Directory is the name that was typically used. Windows calls it folders now. But a folder and a directory is the same thing. And then file is just the individual unit of information out there. Formatting is when we prepare the partition for stuff to be written on it. And they give you the limitations here on FAT32 and NTFS. Partition size limit on FAT32 says it will go up to 2 terabytes in size, and says Windows can read them up to 2 terabytes, but can create them. Notice NTFS will allow us to have a drive partition on the drives, which means our drives can be much bigger than this still, but 256 terabytes. Okay? Have any of y'all seen any 256 terabyte hard drives for sale yet? So I think we're safe on NTFS for a while. Okay? And then obviously we can just split it into different ones. File limits on the number of files. They'll both handle long file names. NTFS uses Unicode, whereas FAT32 used ASCII for storage on it. And so you can actually have more characters you can use with Unicode than you could with their maximum file size. On FAT32 is 4 gigabytes. NTFS, it's 16 terabytes for the maximum size file, which is bigger than we've got the hard drives for consumer use right now anyway. And then the number of files you can have on the drive goes from 268 million to 4 billion on it. So pretty well covered off that one. Although we probably will bump those numbers at some time. I can remember back on 5 1/4 inch floppy drives. I'm trying to remember what was the maximum number it would let you put on it. I actually maxed them out on it before I realized there was a maximum number you could use. I kept going, there's still space on the drive, why won't it write the file to the floppy disk for me? And then I found out that I'd actually filled up the directory on number of file names you could have, which was, seems like it was 30 something for some reason, but it may have been bigger. Whatever it was, I had more files trying to store on the floppy than it could store that number of files but it could still have, and I was only using half the space on the disk because they were such small files. So that can be an issue there, although for right now, that's not realistically a problem to us in terms of the number of files on there. But you could on a server, it is possible that you could have a hard drive on a server that you might bump that. If you had been still using FAT32, which you're not going to be doing, if you are, you need to change it to NTFS. And you can run, Windows includes a program on there that will convert FAT32 to NTFS. Now, Windows does not have a program to convert from NTFS to FAT32, but you can find third-party utilities that will do that. But you could have, very realistically on a server, where people are storing all of their files out there, that I think 268 million files on there might be a number that it would be possible you could bump into. Not likely, but you could have a ton of files out there. So I'm not going to rule that one out for you. As I say, I have hit that rule before, not in terms of these numbers now, but back then everybody thought that was way more files than anybody would ever store on a floppy. I did it. The partitioning can be, you can partition them as basic disk, which have primary and extended partitions. The primary one is the bootable one on it. So whatever you're going to have as the bootable one, it's always got to be the primary. You can have up to 4 primary partitions or 3 primary partitions and 1 extended. The extended one can actually be split into sub drives within it. So you can have a number of, notes there, you can have 24 logical partitions on an extended partition. Dynamic ones are ones that are designed to grow and to attach to other drives, as making the drive bigger and bigger. And that you can do some interesting things with dynamic. Simple ones are just all on a single hard drive. Spanned dynamic ones can be linking across the various parts of other drives and making them all appear to be one. Similar to what we were talking about on striping, but not the same thing as striping. This is just where you've extended to an additional spot that's on another drive. But it's not where the drives are actually looking as a single drive. In striping, they all looked as one drive. So it's a similar approach to it. And then they talk about the GPT partitioning, which is your new way, which is doing instead of MBR. So that with UEIF is using GPT for the GUID partition table, and that each partition has its own unique identifier on it, and that every partition worldwide has its own identifying number, so it's sort of like a MAC address on hard drives. It can be dynamic or basic, and it does have the MBR back in there, so it can look at it from MBR approach also. That it is managed back in there, that so that they can get handled on it. But it does make a difference to you when you're trying to switch things around on it about the GPT. And then they have you create a file system, and disk part or FDisk are the programs you'll use to create your drives out there, to create the partitions. FDisk is Windows program for it. Disk part is the standard one for it. And they have you play around with that some. Whoops, I clicked the wrong button. I didn't mean to start this. I clicked Start Lab instead of. They want you to format some drives. And then they go through and have you mount drives also. That will play into one place you will see is Windows automatically mounts your drives for you. If you use Linux, you are going to have to mount drives. You're going to have to tell it to use the drive, and you're going to use the mount command to do it. Also in Windows now, with Windows 8 and above, you can mount ISO images. What's an ISO image? Where have y'all seen them? ISO images are files that contain exactly what's on a CD. It's a CD image file, okay, or a DVD image file. It's an image file of this optical drive. If you run a program to burn a CD or DVD from an ISO file, it will make exactly the same CD or DVD as it was originally created from. So your distribution of a lot of the programs that you get from DreamSpark/Image are ISO files. They're giving you exactly what they used to put in the carton sold in the store, or that they still sell in the carton in the store. That's got a CD or DVD inside the carton. They're giving you exactly the same thing. It's just you got to burn it yourself. With Windows 8 or above, you can actually mount that ISO image file out there. You can right click on it and tell it to mount it, and it will mount the ISO image as a virtual CD DVD drive out there, and everything that's in the ISO image is now available to you, just like you had just burned a CD or DVD from it. You use the mount command on right clicking the ISO file to get to that, and then you get to work with it just like it was decompressed and made into the full thing. It knows how to work with it, decompressing it and working with it completely there. There are third-party utilities that do the same thing and will work for you back in Windows 7, etc. And that they'll tell you about a virtual drive. Well, that's the virtual drive. And then they tell you how you can increase, shrink, and enlarge partitions, that you make them bigger or smaller as you need to, that you can actually, starting with Windows 7 on, we can dynamically do that out there. Now, you can't be doing anything else to the drives while you're doing that, so that's a boot time utility type thing on it. But you can alter those if you need to. I do that occasionally with my drive at home. I actually don't have my logical drives using up all the physical drive space, and then I later on, because I've got those 3 different logical drives on the one physical drive, I just take the space I need at this point, and then when I fill up, then put a little extra space on there, and then when I fill that up, I go out there and extend it again, making it larger and larger as I need to, but I don't know of C, D, and E which one's going to need enlarging first or whatever, so I just leave unused space sitting out there and then extend into that space as I need to. And then they talk about storage pools and spaces, and that's just logical space, or just logical drives in the File Explorer. And so we've really talked about those already. And so that's there for you also as another way and another term they're using now for it. Disk optimization. This should be the last thing in the chapter. A couple of things that you want to do to them. One is you may well want to perform disk cleanup regularly just by right-clicking on the drive in Windows and going to Tools, so you can see disk cleanup there. They've changed the name around on different versions of Windows slightly on that, but it's still there for you. And it will go through and it will find any pieces of files that are no longer there or anything, and loose attachments, and delete them off your drive for you to get it cleaned up and make those spaces all usable for you again. So you may find you've got more space after you've done this cleanup. There's third-party utilities that do better jobs at that. CCleaner does a good job at it. CCleaner cleans a lot of other stuff off your drive at the same time. Larry Utilities will do it. Norton Utilities will do it for you, and some others. Glary and Sea Cleaner are both free out there for you. Defragment a hard disk, what that does is it takes all of your stuff that's scattered all over the disk, because when it writes it out there, it first looks to try to find spots to put it, and it may split it up across the whole disk. The defragmenting, it gets the file all back together instead of being split out, and it also puts them back to the beginning of the disk. Now the beginning of the disk may be, depending on the disk, maybe the outer edge of the disk or maybe the inner edge of the disk. Some of them work from the inside out and some work from the outside in. And it will move them all around and fix all of that for you, okay? It will speed it up. Now, however, limitation on that. If you have a solid state drive, and some of you are getting solid state drives now, they cost a bit more, but they're faster, okay? Do not do number 2 on your solid state drive. Don't defragment. It handles all of that itself, and it really can't be fragmented anyway because it's not writing it on the disk, it's putting it into a memory type spot on it. Now you can defragment your registry also with Glary and some other things. And you can also, and when it runs the defragmenting programs, the first thing they all do is they do the third one, which is they check for errors on the disk, which are bad areas out there, etc. on it. Go find those first before they go to defragment it. And then they go through and defragment the hard drive. You can also tell it to check this for errors and fix those errors. And if you run it from within Windows, there's a little checkbox for you to check there for it to automatically fix, or else it just goes through and tells you, I found errors, but you didn't say anything about what to do with them, and to fix them, you got to run the thing again, checking the box to clean them all off there. Now another one that is handy on there, but it's not doing any of those items, is SpinRite will do something different than what any of those that is just mentioned to you about. SpinRite will go out there and rewrite and completely goes through your whole disk, and depending on the level you run it on, it will go out there and see when things have got bad bits or whatever in it, but it will read and write everything, rewrite everything onto your disk and align it back up to your read-write head on your disk and make the thing run better, and sometimes retrieve things that you've lost because it looks carefully at it and it reads and writes it like 6 times. So it will go through and get it more efficient. But SpinRite costs you a little bit of money. If I could remember to bring my machine in along with SpinRite, I'd show you on SpinRite. And so then they go through and talk about what I just told you. And then tell you about defragmenting it. With NTFS, it actually schedules itself to defragment itself regularly. If you leave your machine on all the time, it typically does it. Runs through and runs a defragmenter every night or once a week at about 2 in the morning. So you're really not on newer machines from 2000 or so forward, not really needing to run defragmenter very often. That it does it automatically for you on it. NTFS also does a better job of writing the stuff out there and finding places to put it all together. When you run the defragmenter, you can run and analyze first, and then you can defragment. If you run the analyze on it and it says that you've got more than 5% fragmentation, definitely run the defragmenter. You will see a speed difference. 5% is a key number on that one. If it's less than 5%, you don't need to run through and do the defragmenting. Defragmenting will take time. SpinRite, which I was just talking about, so I will take 12 hours to run. Troubleshooting, I think I've told all of that stuff already. And do be aware of the mean time between failure. They actually do tell you that on your disk when you buy them, which is what say on average how much time of device being used till it fails. And they'll tell you in terms of hours on that. That's telling you what's the expected lifetime on it. Sort of like that y'all can all expect in here to live to be 70 years old on average. The mean time between ultimate failure on male human bodies in the U.S. is about 70 years. And that is chapter 5. The next one is chapter 6 is networking. So we have covered this week and next week. So the fact I won't be here next week doesn't make a big difference to us. And networking is what we'll start on Wednesday. Any questions? But we'll go ahead and start looking at networking at that point a little. Now, are you the only one in Cisco? Okay, because he's going to have an easy time on this because he's already heard more than what we cover in here. So chapter 6 will be the easy one for you. Isaiah, okay? Those of you that have taken the first Cisco class already have got more depth than we're going to do networking. But those of you that haven't, you're going to learn some basic networking. Any questions? And I think, what if I got on 6? Should have some time built into 6. 6 starts the 13th, because 6 will run for 1, 2, 3 weeks. Well, 2 weeks plus the holidays. So when we start on 6, that takes us through the end of April. Through the end of March, I think. Not the end of April. I'm jumping like that.
So we're only doing 6, 7, 8, and 10? That's all we're doing left?
Then, but we still got 7, 8, and 10 to do.
Right.
And then y'all got the final assignment to do too. I don't remember. Yeah, 7, 8, and 10 will finish us out. And then y'all got, and remember the last week it's going to be, y'all have all got to be individually, take apart and rebuild the machines. You also got that exam to do the same thing online that's going to pop up sometime on cassette. I may send you a note next week telling you you've got to do it in the next week or two, or I've got it scheduled right now for the end of the semester, but it may have to get done sooner, of the online one, doing it in test out where you build a machine. You don't disassemble it, but just build a machine. But y'all all know how to basically do that anyway at this point. And then we'll actually do it on production, on the actual machines back there like you did the first day. And that will take us a couple of days to do that because we've only got 5 machines back there and you're going to be doing it individually. And obviously that's going to be varying speeds on each of y'all on that. Some of you will get it done real quick by yourself and some of you will take longer to do it. So when we get down there to the last week or so there, I may tell half of you to show up one day and half of you to skip out, and the other day half of you to come and have to skip out if you want, or you can come sit in the other day if you want, but you're just going to be sitting there watching the others working on it or doing whatever you want at your desk. But I'll tell you which ones I do which day, since we can only do 5 and there's more than 5 of y'all in here. Okay? Any questions? I will see you on Wednesday. Don't get too wet out there.